Very good evening to you and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. Welcome to you. This is our first show of the new year, wherever you are. Want to say welcome down. Tonight's show, we're going to have the, how should I describe them? Well, they say they're the bad boys. But for us, they are our voices of the people. We've been locked out of the mainstream media, and these are the men who have created this space for us to exchange our ideas and our views on what is going on, turning social media into a place of protest and resistance, and of course, a place of ideas. So tonight, we're gonna have in the ring, Bostonian Morning Time, conversations with Rickford Burke, and straight up with Mark Benschop, all in one place here on Politics 101. Come down, share the link, and tell the folks we are all here tonight. Happy New Year to you. And tonight we are going to have a general discussion among ourselves about where we were in 2021 and where we are going in 2022. So there's no need for introduction. I'm just going to bring everyone in. We have Rickford Burke, we have Kidackie Amsterdam, we have the one and only man in the ring, Sherod Duncan. Gentlemen, welcome. We're expecting Mark to join us later on. I understand he is a little bit under the weather, but he'll be here with us. So, gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you and good evening.
In the ring,
thank you for having me.
In the ring, we're going to start in the ring first. Sherod and Kidackie and Ford and Mark, when they join, I want you all to pay rapt attention here tonight. You all are not directing your shows. You all are being directed by Andrew Weeks tonight. So I don't want to see anybody fingering with the consoles or those kinds of things. Right? Give me all your attention. Here's my first question. If you all were to describe the year 2021 in Guyana to someone falling from Mars onto our planet, how would you all describe it? Starting with you, Sherod.
Bizarre. That is where I'll start it. You know, the PPP installed catfish regime, they had a long time in governance. Pre-2020, they had 23 years in governance, and it seems as though they had no time at all. You would think they had a time to fix a lot of things, a time of reflection over the last 5 years. But all we have seen, Dr. Hines, is more of the same. That is all the Guyanese people have seen, and that is why we call it bizarre. It's like they have learned nothing. They don't read, they don't analyze, they don't commit to studies. It's bizarre. That's all I can say, Doc. Bizarre.
Rickford Burke, how would you describe to that lady from Mars who was dropped in to Guyana?
I feel the lady is Gail. Gail Fitzgerald.
I would say an ad hoc governance and a descendancy into apartheid tyranny. And I would say that we are on the verge of plunging back on the path of a failed statehood. That's how I would do ad hoc governance, confusion, U.S. ambassador announcing policy for Guyana, Guyana pulling it back, denying it. You have a government transferring the wealth of the nation to its supporters and shutting out everybody else who doesn't support them. Even Anok said that. And then we have abject racism. And surrounding all of that, there's no policy to develop the country that we know of. All we know is that the government is signing deals left, right, and center. And what they're doing is signing away the wealth and the patrimony of the country to either expatriates or their own supporters. So what we have is a massive transfer of the wealth of the state to PPP East Indian supporters and a few blacks that support them, and tyranny, a descendancy into a tyrannic, racist apartheid regime.
The man from Bostonian Morning Time, somebody dropping in from Mars, our neighbor out there, and falling into Guyana and wants to know what's been happening here for the last year, 2021. What would you tell them?
Lawlessness. I will tell them lawlessness has been happening for 2021. From the time the PPP came to office, were installed in August of 2021, this country has returned to a state of lawlessness. We saw the rise in crime again. We saw the government itself engaging in lawlessness, in that all of the commissions that were supposed to be in place, they have not activated them. We saw them dismissing public servants left, right, and center without due care. We saw them distributing the nation's resources to a select few without consideration for the others. All of these things, in my mind, are against the laws of this country. We saw just recently the chaos in the National Assembly in relation to the amendment to the NRF. So yes, one word I would use: lawlessness.
Lawlessness, bizarre, all those words. Listen, is there anything that happened in 2021, or any list of things or group of things that converged to happen in 2021 that you would call a victory for the opposition side? Sherod, your audio.
Apologies there. I would say the strong advocacy in and out of the National Assembly. I know there were lots of persons out there that thought that the opposition should not engage this installed regime through the National Assembly. But that national stage of the National Assembly has its purposes. And I think we saw that more so demonstrated this last sitting that we had, where we said squarely to the PPP, enough is enough. And if you all continue to do foolishness, we will continue to up the ante. And so I think it's the totality of the efforts by the opposition. We went from tongue to tongue, village to village, in large measure throughout this country, talking with Guyanese, getting an assessment of the issues, and trying to bring that to Parliament to bear on some of the policies that were passed. But these guys in Parliament, the installed regime, are so hard-headed. They don't listen, and they keep running into a brick wall all the time. And so we are going to up the ante in 2022.
Rickford Burke, anything for us to celebrate on the opposition side in 2021?
Well, of course, the first thing that came to my mind, I've worked backwards, is the fact that the opposition forced the government to pass an illegal bill. I think what we saw is the pressure that the opposition brought to bear with regard to the purported passage of the Natural Resource Fund bill. And, the speaker basically admitted that the bill was not legally passed. And so you have to give credit to the opposition for the pressure that they brought to bear and their ingenuity in terms of pulling the mace off, doing whatever they can to stop the wealth of the country from being transferred basically to the PPP and their supporters. Also, I think we had a major victory in New York when opposition members of parliament, about 20, and other officials came to New York and said to the world what is happening in Guyana, expose the racism. You had to the point of members of Congress are now commenting on the racism in Guyana. The government was confused. They cursed out everybody. They said everybody who spoke was racist, and including members of Congress. So you have an unsophisticated, uncultured, uncouth set of people running the government, calling United States members of Congress racist, including Barry Jagdeo. That's their tactic. You have a victory for the opposition was that we found a way to get the message out. We use social media to our advantage because, as you said, we've been shut out of the mainstream media. And I think, Doc, in 2022, we must not accept it. We cannot accept a group of East Indian supporters of the PPP. And I'm being specific. It's factual. They're East Indian racist supporters of the PPP who are trying to suppress information coming out of Guyana, suppress the news given to Guyanese people. And so we'll be making a major investment in the media in Guyana coming up in 2022. And we're almost confident, though some of us here in the diaspora, that we'll create the biggest news, online news site coming out of Guyana. And so I think those three things are major victories. Of course, there are others. I think a major victory is that we got rid of David Granger, who was a blight on the PNC, whose submissiveness led by Jagdev to think that everybody in the party is submissive, and everybody in the opposition is probably submissive, and they'll be able to run over everybody. So I think that's another victory. And of course, there are many more. But I think those four things are game changers. The fact that we have the anti-racism, PPP racism rally in New York that brought light, that shone light on racism in Guyana for the world to see. It was a very dramatic response we got from the PPP government. The fact that we have a new leader of the PNC, the fact that we've found a way to get our message out through social media, and also the fact that the parliamentarians, these young parliamentarians that we have now, have begun to represent the interests of their supporters in a more militant way, which is what supporters want.
Kidackie Amsterdam, you have for the last year called specifically for large protests. These did not materialize in the way that you might have envisaged, but is there anything that there is for the opposition to celebrate for 2021?
Well, certainly, Rickford and Sherod have detailed a lot of what we ought to be celebrating. In my mind, we've had many victories. Top of the list to me is that we are able to get our message out. In the past, the PPP was able to control what goes out. They were able to control the media. The opposition was always in a media blackout because you have a media in the country that basically have been bought out by the PPP and their surrogates. And the fact that we, for the last year or more, have been able to reach the people to keep them informed as to what is happening, that's a major victory because the PPP likes silence. The PPP likes to operate in silence. If you don't expose them, they're good with that. And we've been able to use social media to do just that, expose them. And in that light, we have caused them to stop and take note. It's a victory to have them stop and pay attention to Rickford Burke, to Sherod Duncan, to David Hines. We see how they have invested their resources in attacking many of us who are social media activists and commentators. They label you as racist. They twist your Black Pudding statement and stuff like that. That's a victory to make the police stop and pay attention. What took place in Parliament last week, that's a very big victory. Because so the last year or so, the PPP was saying, look, we can do what we like. We can do what we like. They can't do anything. We have the majority in Parliament. And as we say, voila, on that occasion, somebody realized that there's something we can do. We can upset the normal flow of things. And so the normal flow of the Parliament was upset. And the presidency was set. In my mind, every time they go to Parliament, they broke up the Parliament. Because if we can't have inclusive democracy, then we just should break it up. That's my position. Likewise, There's so many other victories that we can claim, right? There's so many other victories. We are the PPP, even though they are on a media blitz to explain what took place in Parliament. Normally, they were saying the opposition is no opposition. They're not giving us opposition. We would like to have some opposition. And here it is, no. You have to stop and take note of what is happening from these social media platforms. So we
and certainly all three of you have cited your own activism or collective activism on this platform. And I think if you were to speak to the maximum leader, Mr. Barra Jagdeo, and his underlings, they will admit, as they have been, that you guys have been making a tremendous difference. Now they will try to undersell the big impact that you're making, but the fact that they now have to follow what we are doing, and they have to contend with what we are doing, I think is perhaps the biggest victory that we have gotten in 2021. And I want to ask you all, do you wake up in the morning and decide, look, I'm going out there to give the PPP hell? Or is it just part of your normal, natural flow of things? Sherod Duncan.
Both. Both. I dare say so. Look, this country belongs to all of us. It belongs to people who support the PPP. It belongs to people who support the WPA. It belongs to people who support Burke's party, CGID. It belongs to all of us. But the PPP wants this country to believe it belongs to them. And so we must confront them every opportunity that we have. And where did we learn that from? I spent most of my life growing up under the PPP, the greater part of my life. Jagdeo says the nature of the struggle has changed, and we got to change along with it. This is a long time, and Dr. Hines, Kidackie, Rickford, I'm happy that we underscore that the message that we have has gotten through. It has broken through all of the barriers that the PPP tried to put in place in the National Assembly, the highest decision-making forum in the land, Dr. Hines. They are denying us from talking to state media. You couldn't get more dictatorial than that. Ministers, installed ministers in this government, were instructing members of state media not to take comments from us. You don't get more dictatorial than that when taxpayers' money paying for these institutions. But like some colleagues of mine said, they were not bargaining for coming back into office, and the way social media is so pervasive. You don't need a license, you don't need a tower, and you can confront them on their own terms. And when you measure, literally, their communication reach, you understand that nobody's listening to them, Dr. Hines. You got 4 or 5 ministers on one program and 5 people tuning in to listen to them. You can't make that up. You see, with radio and so on, you might have a far reach with the signal, but you don't know who listening. But on social media, you can actually measure it. This is a government that's 20 months old, not 20 years, and nobody listens to them. You know why? Because the people have already turned against them. Their own supporters have already turned against them. Dr. Hines, look, yesterday's school open. Lots of them weren't ready, even though we had a long absence. What did Priya and the other folks at the Ministry of Education sit down doing all this time? You got rising COVID cases, mounting COVID cases now, and school reopened, and it's just like business as usual, because you know what? One thing them boys understand, money got to make, and they can do whatever it takes to make the money. That is what we're dealing with here.
Rickford Burke, they went after you more than the rest of us. I imagine they decide to pick you out, to go after you, to send the rest of us to scurry and hide under some stone and not to confront them. But here you are tonight, facing, as Abhijit says, thousands of people those guys speak to tonight. Here you are speaking to thousands of people tonight. Talk to them.
Well, the very night they issued the bulletin, I spoke to thousands of people. I came on, and about 15,000 people watched the program live. Now, yes, I wake up in the morning to do my work and to confront the PPP. We have to confront them. As Sherod said, they believe they own this country. And I am 100% opposed to their racism and their attempt to steal the country's wealth, to transfer it to their own ethnic supporters. We cannot allow that to happen. This is the most egregious atrocity that they're committing. They are transferring the wealth of the country to themselves and their ethnic supporters. We can't allow that to happen. In countries in Africa and in Asia, that triggered war. This is a serious problem. They are inciting, as Kemrat said, I don't have to say it, as Darren Wade said it, they're inciting something that when it starts, I'm not sure they know how to finish it. Now, they went after me because I'm the one leading the fight to expose their atrocity in the international community. And they are so barefaced, right? They have the gall. They know if they come after me, they'll have problems with US officials, right? They don't care because, number one, they think they have the support of the ambassador, who is from the racist Trump era. And the reason she's still there is because there has not been enough outcry in Guyana for her to be removed. Because she embraces, she countenances whatever the PPP does. I have never seen a US ambassador so silent. You go throughout the world, ambassadors condemn atrocity, condemn attacks on members of the press, condemn attacks using cybercrime laws to try to suppress opposition. She is absolutely silent. My only conclusion is that she supports philosophically and culturally their racism. And so we are in touch with US officials all the time about this. And that wanted bulletin, the issue is going to really backfire on the country, because I'm in touch with US officials from the White House to the State Department and Congress about this issue. And all of them have privately condemned it. And I'm sure they'll action. And the action wouldn't only affect the government, it will affect the police force. I'm pretty sure, because those police leaders who have been taking political instructions from the government don't deserve to benefit from US resources. Now, one of the other things that I want to pick up on something Kidackie said that's very important. The government is, and Sherod said it as well, they are running the parliament as if they own it, just like they're running the country. And they're not allowing the elected representatives of the people to represent the people. And I agree with Kidackie. If the members of parliament cannot represent effectively their supporters, break the parliament up. And when we say break the parliament up, we don't mean violence and mash up the building, which is what they're going to say that we're saying. We're saying disturb the process. Ensure that the process of parliament, the sittings can go on, because they are depriving the representatives of the people from effectively representing the people who sent them there. And the other thing is that the game, as Sherod said, that the nature of the struggle will change in 2022. We will now go after investors, because we cannot allow racism, killing of African Guyanese people, and corruption to thrive in Guyana. We can't afford to have an apartheid regime, a PPP racist apartheid regime in Guyana. And so those companies like Exxon and all the other companies that are participating in investments in Guyana, we will start to go after them. We will start to write them. We will start to ask for hearings in Congress. And also, Dr. Hines, we intend to write the Manhattan District Attorney, the New York State Attorney General, the Justice Department, and the New York Federal Reserve Bank to let them know that this law was not lawfully passed, and any attempt to steal the people's money should be investigated. One of the wonderful things about this fund, which is smart of the Granger government, is that it's based in New York, which means that the Manhattan District Attorney can investigate any crimes, the New York Attorney General and the Justice Department. I suspect that they will move that account to a different country shortly.
Rickford Burke there of Conversation with Rickford Burke. We have in the ring the man himself, Sherod Duncan, and of course, Kidackie Amsterdam, who gets up the earliest of us here. After you get up in the morning, Kidackie, wash your face, say thank God for bringing me through the night. Do you decide my next stop is to go and to expose this government?
Well, if you call it expose, my mission every day is basically to bring information to the people. That's my mission. Observe what is happening, research what is happening, and break it down for the people to understand. Because one of the things I find in this society is that a lot of people, despite they may see what is happening, they don't take the time to really understand what is happening. And if that understanding is not there, then you're not going to get the requisite action in terms of pushback against this government. So when I get up in the morning, it is simply to present the facts to the populace, the viewers, do the necessary analysis to help them to understand what is happening, and they take it from there. It turns out that it is giving the government hell. So be it. As was it Congressman Mix who said, do good trouble, create good trouble, make good trouble?
Congressman
Lewis said that.
Yes, sorry.
Don't desecrate.
I am giving them good trouble. That's all I mean.
But you know, Doc, I want to circle
You
back.
can't compare John Lewis to Gregory Meeks. Gregory Meeks embraces the racist government in Ghana.
Do not desecrate John Lewis by.
Doc, I want to circle back to something that Burke said.
My brain is not functioning at 100 right now. I'm not too well.
Okay.
You're up early.
Yes.
Doc, I want to circle back to something that Burke said.
Yes.
You know, in discussing the whole issue of race in Guyana, it's not somewhere that I go to too often, but I think there is merit in what Burke says and what he keeps saying about this race factor locally. And again, Dr. Hines, Kidackie Burke, if you examine, you know, you come away from the personalities and you head to the issues of 2021 and even coming into 2022, this fourth day, you see the undertones, and sometimes it's not even undertones, of how the PPP is operating, the institution that is the PPP. Freddie Kassoon wrote an interesting essay many years ago that got him into some trouble with King Kong. The title of that essay was, to me, it was when Freddie was Freddie. Freddie is a shell of his former self right now. When he was Freddie, the title of the essay was Ethnic Power and Ideological Racism, Comparing Presidencies in Guyana. It was written in 2010. Ethnic Power and Ideological Racism. And I would commend it as a fantastic piece of reading and academic work, I dare say so, to any Guyanese. And I want to quote two parts, Dr. Hines, guys, because it would seem as though it was written just last week. It could have been written yesterday. And this is just, I'm going to quote two parts of the introduction. Here he says, even if one argues that when all parties are defeated and newer ones win elections, there are changes in personnel, the situation in Guyana is that in the total public realms, it cannot be easily explained, save for racial engineering. In another portion, he says, there is a relentless, almost frenetic process of African disappearance in all dimensions of substantial power. And this decrease is a result of government edicts, policies by the ruling elites, and the attitudes of Indian power brokers. This could have been written yesterday. And we see that on a daily basis. So I wanted to underline and underscore what our colleague, our brother Rickford Burke said.
Yes, and of course, yes, go right ahead.
Sorry to jump in there. What Sherod just said there is so important. And you see, the PPP somebody told me I'm more popular in Indian PvP circles than in Afro-Guyanese circles, and that's because they see me as a threat because I'm exposing racism. Now, I live in a society that where we abhor racism that we see, and Doc, you understand what I'm talking about. You live in a, you know, and I cannot allow this to happen. What we're seeing indeed is a systematic institutionalization of racism by the PPP. But they're doing it almost using an apartheid strategy where they have a lot of blacks with no power, they marginalize them, but they hold them up as trophies, right? And then they send out people like Onish Waldron,
Lying on edge.
who is a total house slave, who is one of the most dishonest politicians in Guyana currently. And she only complains about our reaction to the PPP racism. But she doesn't talk about the causes. Why we call people house slave. Why are we so stridently opposed to the PPP? It is because of their racism. To me, fighting the PPP is fighting the KKK. It's fighting Trumpism. They epitomize it in Guyana. And Guyanese must understand that what we see in Guyana is not acceptable. It's not acceptable for you to fire 3,000 people and the whole world silent because their media, their ethnic media suppress the news. It is not okay for you to attack black judges. It is not okay for you to put your people in the police force and give them instructions to go after black people and criminalize them. No, it is unacceptable and it must be exposed. It must be fought. And one of the other things that we see emerging in Guyana, you know, I run into people on the streets all the time in the mall and they come and they say, Rickford, I want to take a picture, but I can't put this on social media because they're going to kill me. Who died and made the PPP owners of Guyana?
Say it again.
Who we must associate with and who could be our friends. Today or tomorrow, Sherod goes to the Pegasus and Bar Jagdale sees him talking to a contractor. He's going to come back and tell him, don't give that contractor any contract. Who the hell is Bar Jagdale?
Yeah. Yep.
To think that he owns our country. And why do we condone it? And why do we put up with diplomats who condone that? So 2022 must be a year when the nature of the struggle changes, when we have to show the PPP, the country belongs to us, and they're just part of the country, and they can't dictate who we talk to, how we assemble, and how we express ourselves, because that's our inalienable right, and they're not going to violate it.
Rickford Burke there, along with Kidackie Amsterdam and Mr. Sherod Duncan on the program tonight. The PPP bad boys who we are elevating to heroes of our community. And we have to talk about our heroes. People don't talk about your heroes. You got to big up your heroes. And
I trained under Rickford and Kidackie.
Well, you're a modest guy. You're a modest guy. And look.
Sherod is the number one hero.
Close your eyes. I'm talking to the audience now. Close your eyes. Shut your eye. And imagine if there was not in the ring or conversations with Rickford Burke or straight up with Mark Benschop or Buxtonian Morning Time and the rest of us bringing in the rear. Imagine if there were not these programs. Close your eyes.
And Politics 101.
What our country would be like. And that is what we are talking about. The power of communion. And what social media has done, it has broken down the physical barriers and connect us every night so that we come here and we talk the talk and we talk the truth and we talk power and we talk resistance to unjustified power. That's what we are about here. Kidackie Amsterdam, talk to us about what you see in those rural communities as you move about the East Coast.
Well, what I see, I see the continued discrimination from a government that is using the nation's resources in a partisan manner. I see fear among the people. Like Rickford rightly said, the average Guyanese doesn't want to be seen in a public way as critical of the government because they feel threatened, they feel endangered. This is a government that has, like it previously did, established its goon squads. They have goons in the communities, the bad boys, enablers of the PPP who threaten the people within communities. Just the other day, we would have seen videos of one saying, listen, the people boxing just got through the line. Right? When you go into the communities, you see the continued lawlessness. Local government representatives doing as they like, especially in those NDCs, PPP control them. They do as they like. For example, in the Buxton Falls NDC, subvention. The subventions are being spent by the minister himself. And that subvention, for the greater part, is used in Indo-Guyanese communities. The Black communities in the NDC get very little or nothing from those subventions. We see poverty because of the different number of persons who have been laid off, the different number of persons who have been discriminated against when resources are distributed. For example, in many of the Black communities, you see people still holding pink slips from the COVID relief. While millions of dollars or billions of dollars were spent in certain PPP enclaves as a result of flood relief, in Black communities, nothing or a pittance. So yes, when you check in the communities, that's what you see. Desperation, perhaps. And that desperation is evident in, I dare say, the behavior of some of our residents from those very communities. We saw just last weekend an extremely large crowd at the Melanie Playground. Super spreader. In this day and age, where Ghana is an oil producing country, people have to be climbing on the backs of each other to get a pittance in a hamper.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That says a whole lot about the kind of governance which we have, about the kind of leadership. And so that's what I see in the communities. I see as, like I like to say, poor people's plight.
Yes.
Doc, I want to jump in here before my
Yes.
brother Rickford comes in, because I might have to run off and leave you guys shortly. But I think one of the missed moments of this install regime was to do some big things, some big things during this COVID pandemic. They've totally wasted 18 months as an administration. Rahm Emanuel, the former chief of staff of Barack Obama and former mayor of Chicago, says you never let a crisis go to waste. But these guys are a pack of waste. That's why we are where we are. For instance, Kidackie mentioned, handouts. And if people are hungry, they don't care who bring in the food. They want to eat. That is human nature.
Yes.
But we could have been transitioning this country from paper money, for instance, really and truly. And instead of forcing people to take vaccination, forcing people to have a bank account so that you can transfer money easily into their bank accounts. And any corner shop should be outfitted with a what do you call it? The thing that they swipe the cards in. Easily, right? But in this day and age, in the 21st century, when you got private companies sending people to space, we are dragging suitcases of money from community to community. You understand how far back we are? Dr. Hines, you said we are social media activists, but you mentioned something even more. You said we discuss ideas. In the 21st century, when Elon Musk and Virgin Atlantic billionaire owner can send privately men into outer space, we are still lugging around suitcases of money. You understand how backward we are as a country? What about that fantastic idea? You call it, I think, the Buxton initiative of transferring oil wealth to the people of this country. Instead of giving us a fish, teach us how to fish. You understand how backward we are? When you come in this country with a phone, when Mark Benschop come home, he has his nice cell phone and Rickford Burke. And once you touch the tomato, nothing works. You can't get Cash App, you can't get PayPal, nothing functions. Right? You understand where we are in this country? When you don't even see a single light sometimes. You know you reach this country when the plane touched down on the aircraft. And these guys got the temerity, you understand, to call us hooligans when all we want is to see progress in this nation. When are we going to start talking about? And that's not even big ideas, because lots of countries right next door in Trinidad, as long as you are working for at least a year, you're entitled to a credit card. You understand how difficult it is to get a credit card in this country? You can get a credit card. Any Trinidadian citizen, as long as you're working for a year, you get a credit card with at least the minimum is 3,000 TT dollars. You understand the hoops you got to jump through to get a credit card in this country? These guys didn't learn nothing. That's the point I was making. They haven't learned anything, and they got us in this mode. And we got to hold the focus in 2022. They are the target. I know for me, I am not taking my eyes off of them. And I've been saying to our Guyanese people, read, get information, edify yourself, educate yourself. You and I are entitled to everything that is in this earth we call Guyana and above it. It belongs to all of us, not one set of people, and especially not this little cabal, the installed catfish regime. Not them. It belongs to all of us, and we have to continue to confront them. And with that said, I take my leave, Dr. Hans.
No, before you go, I want you to tell us, you were in the National Assembly there last week. I want you to tell us what went down. As some people say, you all planned the thing weeks ago. Some say you all planned it hours before. Some say it was spontaneous act of protest and resistance. Tell us the truth.
You know, again, I got to refer to Barack Obama, who says that you got to learn to walk and chew gum. And we were thinking on our feet. And we say we will continue to press the case. And however they respond, we will continue to up the ante. And when we started to protest in our seats, we saw they suspended the assembly to, come up with some strategy in which they will deal with us. And when we come back and when we realized they were not going to pull back the motion, we decided on what was the next move, and we continue to up the ante. And listen to me, for the first time in a long time, Dr. Hines, Mark Benschop, Kidackie Amsterdam, Rickford Burke, I saw the PPP shock. I saw them on their back feet. And we will continue to apply that kind of pressure to them going forward into the near future.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you. I know you got to go and prepare the ring. So you have our permission to take our leave.
Thank you, Doc.
As you leave, Mark Benschop enters.
Fantastic. A better replacement than I am. Fantastic.
Before you go, Sherod, you are correct. When I get there, I will give you a brand new phone. But one of the things that I like about your show is the power in your voice when you give out your PayPal and your Cash App.
We don't run on water. We don't run on water. Unfortunately, we cannot yet match the kind of funding those guys have. And as we were talking earlier on of how they've siphoned off the media, and we say to folks all the time, and I know it has to be the same for all of us, it takes something to keep the lights on. It takes something to keep the internet going. It takes something to keep all of this happening on a daily basis. And unfortunately, we have to rely on our supporters and our viewers for that.
Before you go, though.
Yeah, and when you said dirty and what?
Stink! The wicked stink and dirty.
Dr. Hines, I know Sherod is beating out, as we would say. Hi, Rickford and Kidackie. Good to see you guys. And
Good night. Happy New Year, Mark.
As you can tell from my voice that I'm still a little under the weather.
Yeah.
But,
all right,
when the
Sherod.
Thank you, guys.
When they were live in Parliament, I tell you what, Sherod, I was at the ringside. I paid my money for the ringside. I wanted to see that Pashway, you know, a real Pashway. Good
Mark,
trouble.
listen to me. Mark, we were on the floor of the National Assembly and we were bidding them to come down. I was calling out Kwame. I said, Kwame, this is the night. Come down on the floor. Come down on the floor. I wish you would.
Wait a minute. Kwame didn't go down on the floor.
No, he didn't go down on the floor. He was afraid. For the first time, I thought when a man tells Kwame to go down on the floor, he would be happy. But he retreated. He retreated to the state of the government side. He didn't want to go down on the floor. No. He didn't. He was very hesitant. He didn't know what hell awaited him. He didn't go down on the floor at all.
Monkey know which limb to jump on.
Exactly. Thanks, fella.
Mark, why did you come here and corrupt this whole conversation?
Thanks, fella.
Benschop, if someone were to appear from Pluto and drop into Guyana in 2012 and ask what's going on in this country, what would you tell them?
I'll tell them, based on when I joined you guys a few minutes ago, massive corruption at every level. 2012, we knew exactly what was happening there. We saw a kleptocracy, as Rickford Burke oftentimes say. That hasn't changed. Absolutely nothing has changed. And earlier, Sherod quoted some article back in 2010 that some essay Freddie Kisul wrote. That was knowledge. That wasn't like you need any real deep research for that. It was right there. We all saw it. It was happening. So from 2010 to 2012, and let's fast forward to 2022. I agree with Sherod. I agree with you guys. Nothing has changed. It is the same old PPP. They're up to their old tricks. In fact, they have gotten even worse. Had it not been for social media, God in heaven knows what more they would have been doing. Probably slaughtering people in that country. But it has got to stop, though. So that will be my explanation, that there is no democracy, no real democracy in that country at all. And having said that, the citizens need to stand up, utilize their constitutional rights, and ensure that the country doesn't go down the drain as it was back in 2012, 2011, and so forth. We've got to do that. So that will be my...
Yeah, and I'm very glad you raised that, Mark, because you're a veteran of some important moments. I remember the first time you and I started to do real activism together was in 2010 when we went across the West Bank, when they shot a little boy in front of the school. The police, remember that thing? The boy's name is
one of those primary schools, yes. And
yes, at Wales there. Yeah. And that was our first big protest. Remember, we brought the children down to Georgetown. They charged the driver and all sorts of things. You and I, we had our own protest along with our erstwhile friend, who is now fighting against himself. As though he's fighting against himself. But we are veterans of the Wismar, Mackenzie, Linden uprising in 2011. I'm listing those things because I want to ask all of you this question. Are you all pessimistic as we move into 2020 about a mass resistance movement in Guyana? I'll take you first, Mark, since I'm here. Are you pessimistic or optimistic?
With what we're seeing right now, I'm always an optimist, but with what we're seeing right now, things are not getting any better. However, I'll be more optimistic that things will get better is when people start to stand up for their rights. What you call, like back in 1992, 93, Hamilton Green coined this expression, spiritual and moral revival. Maybe we need more than that. Citizens have to go out. They have to see that this entire country is at stake. It is not about Indians or Africans or whatever. It's about Guyanese. And if Guyanese sit back and allow things to happen, you have a Jagdeo stamping his authority all upon Guyana and people sitting down and just accepting that, well, we might as well just put our hands up. But knowing the type of fighter that I am and you are and the others on the panel, Rickford Burke, who probably is still wanted, the fact that pessimism is quickly taking the front burner. You mentioned that youngster that was murdered by that primary school. Coincidentally, it was the nephew of a notorious policeman who
Yes.
allegations were leveled left, right, and center against him of extrajudicial killings, going into people's homes, murdering their loved ones, their boy child, and all these different things. But it was his nephew who was murdered. But we didn't say, look, it is his nephew. Let us not stand up for justice. We were there. We were fighting for justice for that family, irrespective of who his uncle was. Leon Fraser, that notorious black clothes.
Yes.
When we were at Wales protesting for sugar workers under the PPP regime who ill-treated those workers, we didn't say they're sugar workers and they're supposedly supporters of the PPP, to hell with them. We were there to lend that hand, to hold our brothers' hands and say, injustice must stop. And so in order for optimism to increase, we must see all Guyanese holding hands and say, enough is enough.
Enough. And before I go to you, Kidackie and Rickford, I mentioned that 2010 incident where the youngster was killed because Mark, Freddie Kissoon, myself, I think Ramsarup was with us, and a couple of others. But we went into the community and nothing was happening. And we went there, and within a couple of days, things began to happen. Making that point to say there are different approaches towards organizing struggle. Sometimes people need to see leaders in there, and it makes a big difference. That little movement really took on a life of its own, not because we went there and tell them you must do this or you must do that, but our very presence in that community ignited a protest movement involving school children, women, men, boys, and so on. So I just wanted to throw that in. Kidackie Amsterdam, as we move to 2022, pessimism or optimism about a mass movement?
Well, I usually say I'm the eternal optimist. I'm optimistic that we're going to wake up one day and we're going to see such a turnaround in this country in terms of the people really, really fed up and willing to confront this government, that the government itself will not have an idea of what hit it. So yes, I'm optimistic. The people are eventually going to get woke and confront this government in a way that it needs to be confronted. And I need to remain optimistic. Otherwise, I can't be plowing day in, day out to do the kind of work I do in terms of bringing information to the people. So I have to remain optimistic. And I am actually, I dare say that you're seeing, like I said earlier, that we have had a lot of victories in 2021. And you're seeing a shift in people's behavior. It might not be that big shift that we would want to happen overnight, but we are getting there. More people, for example, are reaching out to me with information, skinning up the government, as we would say. Shortly after August last year, people were very, very afraid, or even mentioning the name Buxtonia Morning Time, or calling the phone number, or messaging the phone. But more and more people in high places, people in places where you never expected, are reaching out and providing information. And so people are really getting fed up. They become more aware. And so, yes, I'm optimistic that we're going to get to that point where we're going to have some serious confrontation with this government. I think what we need to do to fuel that optimism and fuel that agitation, if I can call it that, is continue to educate the people about the ills of this government. The passage of that NRF amendment, we need to go into the communities by whatever means and educate the people about the impact of that amendment should we allow it to stand and allow the PPP to have their way.
Rickford Burke, optimism, pessimism as we move into 2022?
Well, I'm optimistic that this government would be confronted by the people. I'm optimistic that there'll be international pressure as we expose their atrocity and bad governance. And I expect by the end of 2022, the international community would start to take steps to remove this government. Now, let's look at what is happening. First of all, we established earlier that they think the country belongs to them. They think that the resources of the country are for them and their supporters only. So for instance, with the cash grants, Sherod mentioned them dragging suitcases. They could have used bank accounts. They didn't want to do it because they wanted to steal the money. The reason they used cash grants is because they wanted to thief the money. That's what they came up with, because they want to steal the money. So they've used all sorts of mechanisms to transfer the wealth of the country to their supporters, be it the COVID cash grants, be it the flood relief grant, where one of their supporters got $1 billion, and the transfer of government money to these so-called contractors. And like I've been saying, Dr. Clive Thomas, your colleague, did a study where he found from 2001 to 2008, they stole $1 billion. The country lost $1 billion US to corruption. And he did another study from 2010 to 2012, where the country lost $500 million, 443 million US to PP corruption. Out of that, 144 million was through procurement fraud. So there's a wholesale transfer of the country's wealth to their supporters. And in the meantime, they're starving regions, towns, and localities that don't support them for funds. For instance, they're not giving Georgetown funds. They're not giving adequate funds to Region 4, Region 10, Region 7. And our people pay taxes. The people in Region 4, businesses and individuals, pay the most taxes in the country, but they're getting the least amount of resources from the government via subventions. So they're starving the regions that they did not win for funds. Then what they're also doing is using the resources of the state to benefit themselves and their supporters as well. They're using government vehicles. They're using, for instance, they've vaccinated their friends and their family with certain vaccines while they were giving the rest of the population Sputnik V vaccine that is not recognized internationally. So everything they're doing, it suggests that they're not interested in the rest of the country. They're only governing the country for their supporters. That can't last. It can't last. It's going to lead to some form of resistance. And also in 2022, Doc, I'm optimistic because we'll have to force the PPP to get engaged in equitable governance. There must be equitable governance. There must be equal amount of contracts that are given out by the government. There must be equal amount of distribution of house lots. There must be equal amount of land allocation, equal amount of projects for the oil and gas industry. And we have to force them to reverse all these attacks on Afro-Guyanese. The charges against Afro-Guyanese members of parliament and GCOM officials and lawyers and former CEOs, they must all be dropped or be dismissed by the courts. I just noticed a ruling last Thursday by the Chief Justice. It didn't attract any attention in the press, where the Chief Justice dismissed their attempt to take away the lands from people that were sold, the famous Peters Hall deal, where the government was sending letters and then moved to court to try to take away the land that was legitimately sold by NISIL, the land in Peters Hall. And out of that same land deal, they charged James Bond and they charged Calvin Heath London, the former CEO of NISIL. But the Chief Justice dismissed that, ordered them to leave the people with their land. And now the Attorney General has wrapped up his probably $1 million loss. Now, if you are claiming that that was an unlawful transaction, which the High Court now has said it was not, then how criminal charges against James Bond and Calvin Heath London could have derived when it was a perfectly legitimate transaction. So I'm left to see what the chief magistrate and McLennan is going to do with those charges, because the High Court has said it was a legitimate deal. So Dr. Hines, all in all, I am optimistic that in 2022, the PPP will be exposed, they'll be held accountable, the international community will become aware and take action about their atrocities. And most important, we have to start informing investors that they're investing or partnering with a racist apartheid regime that is stealing the money from the people. And again, like I said before, I am so happy that that money in the Natural Resource Fund, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, is in New York. Because if they touch that money without proper authority, or they engaged in corrupt act when they withdraw that money, they can be investigated by the District Attorney of Manhattan, the Attorney General of New York, and the Justice Department. And some of them are going to go to jail right in America.
Mark Benschop, and this is for the other two panelists. We've been talking about the prospects for 2022. We ended the year 2021 with the election of a new leader in the major party in the opposition coalition. Is the opposition in a better place in January of 2022 than they were in January of 2021? And I'm talking here about the official opposition. You go first.
All right. Just a slight disagreement and a respectful disagreement with my friend Rickford Burke in terms of the optimism of the U.S. government removing the installed regime in Guyana. We went into 2021 with that same belief. It didn't happen. And I think that we have to move beyond that. Any corrupt government, any dictatorship, any installed regime will be removed once they have people's resistance. If there are no resistance, then it is less likely that the US government will focus on what is happening in Guyana. As of now, there's very little resistance, if at all in any. One expects that those who are elected officials, especially those who are in the opposition, should be out there, should continue to stand up even more in 2022 for the rights and defend and protect the rights of the citizens of that country. And I think, have we seen that in 2021? Very little of that. Do I want to see that in 2022? Yes, I want to see that our MPs, especially those who are in the opposition, and politicians, whether they are elected to serve in the House of Assembly or whether they are from their respective parties in the coalition, they need to be more aggressive. They need to have good trouble. Those who have been slumbering in 2021, I hope that they wake up in 2022. In answering your question, I assume you're talking about the leadership of the PNCR. I would gauge this based on public's perception. And the public's perception is they feel that they are in a better place. Now, feeling and seeing are two different things. However, the new leader was just elected, and I do believe that he ought to be given some time to get his act together. When I say that, in terms of whatever he believes the problems are of the PNC, to sit down on the table, sit at the table with others, like-minded individuals, party members, senior party members, whether they're elderly, whatever it is, sit down, iron out the differences, and ensure then that there's a pathway where all of their supporters will be properly represented. That is yet to be seen. However, I just need to see some more evidence other than the perception of this standing up against an evil, a racist, and a corrupt installed regime. I am watching, and I'm willing to give Aubrey Norton that chance.
Kidackie Amsterdam, same question to you.
That is whether or not the opposition is in a better place.
In January of 2022 than they were in January of 2021.
Yes, I believe that the opposition is in a better place in January 2022 than they were in 2021. Reason being, a lot is dependent on leadership. And the kind of leadership which we saw in the opposition in 2021 was the lethargic type, the type that was seemingly unwilling to confront the government in meaningful ways, the type that was saying that they have the majority, we can't do anything. But fast forward to 2022, we've seen a more energetic kind of leadership coming from the recently elected leader of the PNC. Um, if you look at what went on in the parliament, the last sitting there, that was a total flip, if I can call it that, to what obtained previously. And so I'm believing that the opposition is in a better place. Um, they seem more energized. And as we continue to observe, it is my fervent belief that we're going to see a more aggressive opposition being created to confront this government as we move forward into 2022.
Rickford Burke, I know you have had some choice words for the opposition during 2021. A lot of it's justified. Do you think they're in a better place January 2022 and going forward?
Absolutely. I think that the opposition is beginning to adequately represent their people. I think, you see, the opposition needs to understand that the people are behind them. And the people need leadership, as Kidackie just said. And if people need leadership and a safety net, and the militancy that we saw with regard to the passage in Parliament of the militancy against the passage of this PPP Natural Resource Fund bill, I think gave a lot of people some hope. People felt encouraged. People want to see the confrontation. They want the PPP confronted. And as Kidackie said, we didn't see that before in the Parliament. I think something has happened. The opposition MPs feel energized. We have some bright young people in Parliament, and the leadership of the party and the leadership of the opposition need to give them the space to operate. Let them bring some new thinking to opposition. They should become one of the most effective parliamentary opposition in the region, because you have a lot of bright young people who can bring innovation to opposition politics. But I think something was holding them back, and I suspect that was the leadership of the main party. Now, the other thing that I think is beginning to happen is the opposition is uniting. The party is now, the PNC is now uniting. And I think once you have the unity in the opposition, it begins to create a safety net for the people to feel more secure. I think were it not for COVID, you will see some more militancy on the street. Some of the activism Mark is talking about that he'd like to see. And of course, I don't think the US government is going to come and topple the government of Guyana. But I think that some of the measures you will start to see, some of the sanctions, some of the harsh talk we'll see will undermine the government. I'm talking from the international community. I think the government will have to start paying attention to what the international community is saying. I think one of the main stumbling blocks to the international community acting in Guyana is the US ambassador. The US ambassador, I'd rather suspect that when she leaves that post, she's going to stay in Guyana and work for the government or advise the government or become a lobbyist or something, because I've never seen a US ambassador so complicit with bad governance and racism. But all in all, I think the opposition is in a better place. Their supporters like the posture right now. We in the diaspora like it, and we will continue to support them. And like I said, the people will come along once they have the leadership, they see the militancy from their leaders in Parliament, and they have a safety net where the police is not going to be allowed to abuse them. The international community is not going to allow that to happen. And we are working on that aspect of it. And so I want to say to the members of the opposition, continue to be bold, continue to be militant inside and outside of Parliament, confront the biased speaker, confront this racist government, push them into the ground, push them into defeat. That's the purpose of an opposition. And the opposition members of parliament have begun to do that. And the people are well pleased. So they're in a better position.
Member of Parliament Tabitha Sarbo Ali just said that what happened in Parliament on that day had nothing to do with who was elected as leader of the PNC. Anybody cares to react to that statement?
I don't think anybody said that. So yeah, she might be right, but that's not our contention.
And she's a member of parliament. But one of the things, though, Burke and I go way back, and seldomly we do disagree with each other. And whenever we do, it's respectfully. I do believe one of the other things that I disagree with Mr. Burke on is that when he said that the biggest stumbling block for the U.S. government is its ambassador to Guyana. The U.S. is not like Guyana. And if the U.S. government, if the Biden administration felt that the U.S. ambassador is that stumbling block, she would have been removed by now. The fact that she has not been removed and she will be serving out her term, which comes to an end next month or early March. The fact that there has not been a replacement thus far tells a different story. And that story is they seem to be very comfortable with her. And I wouldn't be surprised, Burke and others, if Sarah Ann Lynch, the U.S. ambassador to Guyana, gets an extension to remain there in Guyana. I just thought that I say that I disagree with that the U.S. government, she is the biggest impediment there for the U.S. government. Hope I read you correctly. Dr. Hines' question as to what the MP said, that what happened in Parliament had nothing to do with the election of a new leader of the People's National Congress reform. Some people may argue because people want that sort of confrontational leadership. People want that. And any level, any sort of evidence in that direction, they are going to grab with it and run, and they're going to say, as they are saying what happened in Parliament the other day with the mace and all these different things, is as a result of the new leadership of the PNCR. It is up for debate. That is up for debate. I may offer a different opinion to some who believe that the leadership, because the change of the leadership, automatically confrontation begins. In politics, it simply means it takes time, and it doesn't happen overnight. I, like every one of our listeners, or most of our listeners, want stronger leadership in terms of responsible confrontation in exposing, confronting, and hopefully depose of that dictatorship from that installed regime. That is just my take on that.
Yeah, and Mark, if I may extend on what you're saying, I mean, politics is both reality and perception. And sometimes perception becomes reality. And while the MP may be correct, and I don't doubt her that they didn't say, well, no, look, we have a new leader and this is what we are going to do. But the fact that people showed up outside of that place, there weren't too many people, but people showed up, it means that they were expecting something different from the MPs. And so the perception that what happened there has to do with this change is something that you really can't fight. I mean, I move around quite a bit when I'm in Guyana, and I'm here now. I notice some people are saying, why don't Burke and Benschop and Hines come to Guyana? But I'm in Guyana, sirs and ladies, whoever you are, and I never would run away from my country, you know. And I'm sure I speak for the other brothers here. So I'm here. And as I move around this country, that's something else that I want to bring to the attention of the panel. It is amazing how many people from different walks of life, children, who would stop me and ask me if I think Norton and bring better for us. And say that to say that people are more tuned in than we think. They may not be on the streets holding up placards and all, but they are conscious. And I'm saying that you guys here on this program are mainly responsible for that. Sometimes I think we argue against ourselves, knowing the kind of effect we are having on ordinary people. So, one, people are tuned in. And secondly, all right, They are optimistic that that change in leadership is going to bring about. There's some things you just don't fight against. You roll with it. All right. Um, Prior to 2022, opposition was pinned to failure unfairly. The opposition was pinned to Granger. And failure unfairly, those same opposition MPs are today going to be pinned to the new leader. That's the reality of politics. There's a little thing there.
Dr. Hines, if I might just follow up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if I might just follow up on, I think Mark read my comments incorrectly. I am not, first of all, I think we have two different interpretations of the U.S. posture with regard to the ambassador. I don't think Guyana is a priority in terms of a new ambassador. And I'm getting this from my interaction with both state and State Department officials and legislators. Now, one of the things Mark said that I agree with is that there is not enough outrage expressed in Guyana. I don't know why about the U.S. ambassador. Second, no, the U.S. government policy derives greatly from the reports they get from the ambassador and the embassy. For instance, all of the actions that the Trump administration took, the aggressive action that the Trump administration took with regard to the elections last year and the recount, it is because of the representations reported up the chain by the ambassador. Now, if I am pretty sure, if the U.S. ambassador was reporting what we are seeing and not what her perception is on Guyana, you would see a different action by the U.S. government. If the U.S. ambassador was reporting to the State Department about the racism, about all of the Afro-Guyanese being fired, about police being misused and all of that, you will see serious action by the U.S. government. She's not doing it. And I'm talking to state, up to Saturday, I spoke to people from the U.S. government, and they're not seeing the kind of report that we are sending to them coming out of the U.S. embassy in Guyana. And I've even been interacting with a person at the embassy who has been defending that posture, and another diplomat from Guyana, part of the ABC countries, not from Guyana, but in Guyana, has been disputing with me my perception of what is happening in Guyana. For instance, this diplomat said to me, well, the reason why you're not seeing any action is because we don't believe there's a level of racism that you're making it out to be. In other words, they're telling me that I am exaggerating the level of racism. Now, when we see diplomats with that kind of posture, their governments are not going to change the policy. And so that's why I'm saying, to me, there needs to be a fact-finding mission to Guyana. And I think you might see that shortly. Also, one of the things that has been happening with this administration is that the Trump administration has so stymied the work of the Biden government that they still have not gotten up to speed in terms of their appointment at the deputy level, deputy secretary levels, assistant secretary levels. So I think it's a different priority. We ought to make Guyana a priority. And it is the people, as Mark said, it is the people in Guyana that will have to make Guyana foreign policy priority for the United States by standing up for their rights. Guyanese cannot remain silent anymore and allow the ABC diplomats to misrepresent what is happening in Guyana. And for instance, in the U.S. Human Rights Report this year, they made a passing reference to the fact that the police violated the court order and broke into Christopher Jones's home. They didn't mention all of the atrocities. They just mention it as a human rights abuse. It's a political abuse. It's an abuse of the police force. It is the use of the police force to prosecute and persecute political opponents. But they did not report that. They just said, they violated Christopher Jones's right, as if this is a police thing, right? They did not mention the fact that they completely disregarded a court order and that the government is acting in a way that undermines the authority of the court. If they had been reporting exactly what has been going on in Guyana, I think there'll be a change in U.S. foreign policy. And like I said, I anticipate that sometime this year, there's going to be some sort of movement with regard to either sending a fact-finding mission to Guyana or we see a new ambassador. We cannot continue, and we in the diaspora will agitate for that. We cannot continue to have a U.S. ambassador who's a Trump appointee, who is complicit with racism, complicit with PPP corruption. She went to the home of a PPP supporter who is under investigation for funding terrorism, money laundering, drug trafficking, and a whole lot of other crimes, and said she didn't regret it. She doesn't need to be in Guyana.
And there you have it, Rickford Burke. We're running low on time, and so I'll ask each of you for your closing thoughts. Starting with you, Mark Benschop.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hines, for this opportunity. And I just want to say, because some people are not objectively reading into what I'm saying, is that I have been there long enough on the ground to understand the excitement of people, their enthusiasm, especially when a new leader is elected. I was there when Mr. Corbyn, after the death of Hugh Desmond Hoyt, from chairman, he became leader of the party. That excitement was there, albeit I was where I was for that solitary confinement for 5 years. But I saw and I was reading about that excitement from the support base. I also saw that excitement in the beginning. I also saw lots of disappointments from the very people who shared that excitement in the beginning when Mr. Corbyn was elected. I also saw that excitement when David Arthur Granger was elected leader of the party. So the point that I'm making is, having been there before, to share that that sort of excitement from individuals, only to later see those same people turn their fingers and pointing and blaming those leaders for one thing or the other. And with the election of Mr. Norton as leader of the party, of the PNCR, all I'm saying is that I am approaching this in a very cautious manner, having outlined the experiences there with those other leaders. So because I want to be objective, it doesn't mean that I dislike Aubrey Norton or I want to see Aubrey Norton fail. If Aubrey Norton fails, it simply means all of us fail. And so it will be a madman who would want to see the new leader of the People's National Congress reform fail. Do I want to see Aubrey Norton fail? No. Am I approaching this cautiously? Yes. It is still young. A couple of weeks since he has been elected. He needs to be given an opportunity. However, I am basically pointing things out in a very objective manner, having been there before. Not like some with who are emotional and jumping in and thinking that a Benschop has to be pro 100% Aubrey. And if I am perceived to be 75% Aubrey, it means that I am anti-Aubrey. I don't like Aubrey. That is foolishness from individuals who do not understand politics. Having said that too, Mr. Burke mentioned, and that is why I'm saying for 2022, we have to approach this cautiously. State Department operates different levels. As it pertains to the U.S. ambassador to Guyana, I continue to say that based on appearance, the U.S. government seems very comfortable with her there. ExxonMobil seemed very comfortable with her there. If they were not comfortable, she would have been removed a long time ago. The fact that she has not been removed tells a different story. Burke is correct. The people need to come out. They need to stand up. They need to speak out against racism. They can't just depend on an ambassador through a note to state to say that this is what is happening in Guyana. People need to protest, not just in Brooklyn. And even when you protest in Brooklyn, it is still good trouble. And I salute those individuals, Burke and others, who do that. But our protest action needs to go beyond Brooklyn. We need to be in front of state, the Department of State, to highlight the situation in Guyana. We need to, from a collective standpoint, approach state as a group, human rights individuals with experience, to say to those at state, Department of State, these are the things that are happening in Guyana. And the people need to see these sort of evidence. We can't just come and just give them blank promises that the State Department or the US government going to deal with the regime of Guyana and these sort of things. Because when we build that sort of hope up with people and they don't see it, it doesn't become a reality, then people become disappointed. And so, not disagreeing with my friend Burke, but I'm saying I have a different approach, which is cautiously optimistic. And in that process, not to telegraph our shots, because politically speaking, we cannot let our enemies, our political enemies, know what we are doing or what is being done behind the scene. So, Dr. David Hines, thank you again for this. To share this panel with Burke and Kidackie and Sherod Duncan, and to all of our your listeners, prosperous 2022 and more trouble, real trouble for 2022. I'm optimistic about that. Thank you, sir.
Kidackie Amsterdam, closing thoughts.
My closing thoughts. Well, the fact is, regardless of the leader that any organization has, the onus is on the people to put their shoulders to the wheel. The onus is on the people to support that leader. Leaders might be willing to fight, but if there is no army to fight with them, then we're simply exposing them to blows. And so, in my mind, seeing all that we saw in 2021, all that continues to unfold in 2022, it is important that Guyanese at home and in the diaspora awake from what is an apparent slumber. It is time we throw fear to the wind and join our hearts and hands together and embrace this struggle in a way that it has not been embraced since August of 2021. It is important that we continuously call for boots on the ground. But it is important not only to call for boots on the ground. There are lots of people who sit on social media and say boots on the ground. Where are the protesters? But they don't look internally to see themselves as protesters who are not on the ground. And so those of us who sit and say we are the protesters, we must ask ourselves why we are not out there with the others. Because it is important that we be out there. One dirty bill dam, we might not recognize the importance of each of us being determined to go there. But when each of us go out there, then the numbers swell. Then others are encouraged to be out there. And that is my fervent hope that this year, more of our citizens will recognize the importance of joining the struggle, not on social media, not from the background, but on the ground, at ground zero. Last year, I, blowing my own horn, was able to get the installed government to react. Because for months, people were walking around on the square of the revolution, like I like to say, around the walls of Jericho. And the government was least worried because you weren't disrupting anything. But just for a few hours, I went in front with a few people of the Ministry of Education, and we saw the hands of the government. We were attacked, we were arrested, and we were still before the courts. And so there are people who are willing to lead. But it is important that citizens stand not behind them, but beside them, and let us together confront that which needs confronting. And I'm encouraging that. Regardless of the leader, yes, leadership is important. If you have lethargic leadership, you are going to get lethargic followers. And my good friend liked to say, if you give lions a sheep as leader, then it will become like sheep. Right? Likewise, if you give sheep a lion for leader, they will become like lions. Leadership is important, but it is also important that the followers support their leaders. And that is what is required in 2022 going forward.
Rickford Burke, your closing thoughts?
Well, thank you. I want to pick up right where Kidackie left off and say to Guyanese that you ought to stop asking when this will happen or when that will happen. Like I would look at Mark's show or my program, and I'll see people asking, or people send me, when is the Biden administration going to act? When is something going to happen? And they all sit at home and they're asking us, when is action going to take? We as Guyanese have to learn to get involved in political activism. Because when the three of us, Mark went to jail so that many others could get freedom in Guyana. Those of us who are here making a sacrifice, we have other things that we can do. We are making a sacrifice so that others in Guyana can be free. They could be equitable governance. They can be freedom of speech. They can be involvement by the opposition in the governance of the country. That's what Guyana is for. Guyana belongs to everybody. We can't allow the PPP to control the entire country. And so we must not accept the fact that the PPP is a totalitarian government or the PPP is a tyranny. We must fight them. All of us must collectively stand up and resist that. It is your right. You have a right to confront your government. Kidackie mentioned they were arrested in front of the Ministry of Education. They have a right, freedom of assembly, regardless of COVID. They have a right. But what has happened in Guyana, what has emerged in Guyana, is the PUP has effectively banned protests. And we've just accepted it. It's like we're in Russia. From the time you assemble anywhere in Georgetown, the PPP sends the police to arrest you. I remember when the Granger administration last year introduced the COVID emergency measures. Priya Manichan and a group of people were outside of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs protesting. And Bharat Jagdev and Priya Manichan and these others, even Arfan Ali, they were accusing the APNU AFC government of using COVID to ban protests. Now that's what they're doing. They have effectively banned all form of protest. And if you notice, they're going back to, I understand that they're planning to arrest Sherod. And I want to see them do that. We must not accept that all of these things in 2022, we must not accept. Go out and protest. Now, one of the other things, we cannot only keep protesting and have these shows without a resolution. We have to work towards a resolution. And the resolution that we all, I'm sure, want to see is equitable governance. Nobody wants to create hell in the parliament. It is necessary because you have to understand that the opposition has represent people, half the population, and the views of the opposition must be taken into account. You can't railroad the opposition. So there must be militancy in parliament. And there was militancy in parliament because the government attempted to railroad and run over the opposition. We have to have equitable governance. All the state boards, the laws require it. The state boards require that the law requires that state boards be equitable. There must be equitable governance. The regions must be funded. There must be equitable allocation of government contracts to both Indians and African Guyanese and Amerindians. We all Guyanese. The government doesn't own the treasury. There must be equitable distribution of house lands, house lots, land for investment projects. There must be equitable governance in terms of the oil and gas projects. That's what we want to see. We don't want to sit here to just oppose the PPP because we want to oppose them. Yes, we understand that they got it there via fraudulent votes, but they're the government and they must govern the country for everybody. And in 2022, that must be our focus. We must not allow them to transfer the wealth of Guyana to their East Indian supporters alone. We must not allow it to happen. The country belongs to all of us, and we must fight for equitable governance. We must fight for true democracy. We must fight for freedom of speech. We must fight for freedom of assembly. We must fight to make sure that the government governs the country for everybody. That's my focus in 2022.
And with that, I think we will have to bring our program to a close. It was quite a discussion. The first edition of Politics 101 for 2022.
Thanks for having me.
Huh?
Thank you for having me.
And you're welcome. Being kicked off by the bad boys. The bad boys. And their bad boys are,
Happy New Year, everybody.
Are our good boys.
Same to you, Rickford.
Right?
Yeah. But one other thing with what Rickford said, that we have to fight for these things. We also think, in addition to that, we have to fight our politicians, our elected officials, to fight for us too, because they have to be motivated enough. If they are not motivated, then the people wouldn't be. But for 2022, I pray to God that they are motivated to fight.
Yes,
A good
yes.
fight.
And I want to share that as the veteran here of struggles. I believe in 2 man in more. What people say, 2 man in more, 2 man in more, meaning that the revolution may surprise all of us. People are asleep. Picnic, bush got is, but they're not asleep. Right? The people are ready. The people are ready. The people are ready. But people don't make revolution. Mark Benschop said it just now. It's people and leaders. And when people are found wanting, we must not only examine their ranks, examine our own ranks. What are we not doing to translate what is always there into the struggle that we want to be? Right? Thank you, brothers, for kicking us off. 2022, I think it's going to be the year of the turn. The year of the turn. See you all tomorrow night. Thanks again, my brothers.
Welcome.
And tomorrow is Wednesday. Those of you who can go to the funeral of Dr. Long, Professor Long, she's been buried.
Good night and thank you.